What is up, guys? Frosty here today for another Frosty Features. Today we have our final Night Stalkers character that we're going to talk about here in Marvel Strike Force. And today it's going to be Oath, which is going to be, I'm very excited to talk about Oath. Oath is Karen Page. Karen Page is from the comics. It is not entirely there's been a lot of conversation about whether or not this is a MSF original character. It is not as an MSF original take on a character, which I'm super excited about, and I hope that you are too. If you haven't been to one of these before, what this is a comic book background on the tunes that you use in Marvel Strike Force, and I am your guide through the pages. So, let's get rolling. Oh! This is the story blog post description that was given by Scopely, and we will rate this at the end of the feature, and I will read it to you right now. So here we go. When the sun sets, the streets of New York become even more dangerous. Unfortunately, Karen Page found that out the hard way. A ceaseless force for justice, Karen Page helped co-found the law offices of Nelson and Murdoch. There she helped the two lawyers represent the downtrodden and forgotten in the system before eventually running her own legal clinic to help those in the throes of drug addiction. But while traveling home from work one night, Karen was bitten by a vampire and turned. She was found by Man-Thing, who then contacted Morbius to help Karen come to terms with her vampirism. She adopted the name of Oath and joined Moon Knight, Blade, and Agatha Harkness in the fight against the increasing vampire threat. That is the blog post thing. We will rate that at the end of the feature. Moving forward, this is Karen Page, very poorly photoshopped. You're welcome. Name, Karen Page, from Earth 78149. So, in Frosty Features, we typically only reference Marvel 616 canon. What this is main comic book continuity for Marvel Strike Force. For Marvel, right? All of the characters in which you read from Marvel stem from the Marvel 616 universe, one way or the other. Every character is based on another character or has some sort of relation. This is generally speaking, there's always exceptions, but they have a base in the 616. So typically what we talk about is these bases. Due to the fact that we have an entire backstory brought up about Oath that is unique to Marvel Strike Force, Marvel Strike Force's Earth designation or comic book designation is 78149, right? So this version of Karen Page is unique specifically to Marvel Strike Force, which is super cool. I really enjoy the backstory, and it gives us a pretty good reason why her tags aren't, I'm a random secretary, here it is, right? So that's very exciting. So we are going to be talking about the bases that made Karen Page from Earth 78149 into a thing. These bases include the Karen Page from Marvel 616 canon and the Karen Page from Earth 159999, which is the MCU, whether or not they keep using 616 or not, they have an official designation, as does Marvel Strike Force. First appearance, Daredevil #1, all the way back in 1964. So for those of you who maybe missed the vote, aren't aware of this, what have you, Karen Page is most well known as the secretary for Nelson and Murdoch as far in the Daredevil comics. So everything we're going to talk about today is going to stem from the Daredevil comics because that's where she's from. She, as a comic book character, she's very influential, but she's short-lived, more or less. 1964 to 99. I guess it's not very short-lived, but she dies. It hasn't come back in over 20 years. But she's not like a superhero. She's just a girl, right? But she's influential, especially in the lives of Foggy Nelson and Matt Murdock, right? And yeah, powers and abilities. So for the sake, Karen Page, for all intents and purposes, 616 15999, no powers. In Marvel Strike Force, what we see is we have a superhuman, right? In every way, she's a vampire, so super speed, super reflexes, blood censoring. She also, she seems to be, draining blood from her hands, which is pretty cool. Vampirism, and then, so I said darkness manipulation for the fact she shoots this dark tornado. She also, when she's slurping the blood or the essence from people in the red thing when she flies over the top of them, that seems to either be some sort of blood manipulation or also this dark manipulation. I'm going to argue that it's the darkness manipulation because the tornado also has tints of red in it, so that's sort of where we're at. But we can make these assumptions because this has been presented to us by Marvel Strike Force as being a Marvel Strike Force specific character. Not, oh, hey, this is the Incredible Hulk, therefore it automatically is the one from the Marvel Strike Force universe. No. We are playing a game where every character is pulled from different universes, right? So all the lores count, whether you like it or not. Even in Karen Page, in Oath, that doesn't exist outside of Marvel Strike Force. Clap. Back to your mama. Let's go. Aliases, Page, Angel, and Oath. This is a pseudonym that we end up having to go under for a little while, and then, of course, Oath for the sake of the Marvel Strike Force character. Outside of this, Karen Page really is a no-duel. She doesn't really go by anything. She doesn't do anything because she pretty much is just a secretary. Actress, thing, right? She's a Marvel female character supporting, therefore she tried to be an actress. Affiliations, only Night Stalkers, right? Karen Page, Nelson and Murdoch, the company. That's about it, right? We do some dealings with Avengers characters, but she's not part of it. Very loosely associated. Background, Fagin Corners, Vermonter. I didn't know they were called Vermonters until I started putting this together, but she was born in Vermont and went to New York. So, who died? So, as I spoke before, we are going to talk about Karen Page in 1599999. In the 616, nobody dies for her to become a situation. But Oath, the Marvel Strike Force version, is based off of the MCU version. Here's why, right? In the blog post description, it is pointed out that she is part of the founding of Nelson and Murdoch, right? This is only true in the comics. She is there, but she isn't part of the founding thing. She got brought on in the MCU. She is part of them actually putting it together. She's the first hire. They're all putting it together, and you can make the argument that she's there for the comics because she's in number one. But ultimately, this really points to the story of Karen Page in the MCU. The Karen Page in the MCU is a lot more, granted, I have a lot of reservations about the character in the MCU, but she's a lot more engaging and interesting than in the comics because she does a lot more things. I do feel like Percy, as of this recording date, right, we've got the whole Defenders shows, right? I do feel like when the writers got to a point when it was like, oh, hey, I don't know where to go from here. They're like, let's make Karen screw something up and everybody has to deal with it. Right? So that I don't care for her that much in the MCU, but even so, I love those shows. That's just my biggest complaint about it. But in the MCU version, there's a situation where it's at the very first episode, I believe. She essentially she becomes conscious, and she's bloody with a knife sitting over atop her dead brother Kevin. And so this gets her involved with Nelson and Murdoch because Matt can tell she's not lying, because that's part of Daredevil's powers, is that he can kind of, his hyper senses, he can hear whether or not people are lying by the beating of their heart, and he knows she's not lying, so this is who they choose to defend, right? So with that, because of this, my argument for this being based off the MCU Karen Page, that leads her to becoming Oath because her brother died. She became associated with Nelson and Murdoch via the death of her brother. Therefore, this wouldn't have happened without the death of her brother. There it is. So, and 1599999 is based on 616. That's where we get all this stuff, right? Karen Page in 1599999. I kind of just explained it, right? So she is quite a bit different. She's definitely more of a beacon for justice. She goes down the route of becoming a reporter, which isn't exactly what happens to Karen Page in the comics. She tries to become an actress. And then she kind of just becomes a social advocate, which isn't that different. But in both situations, she kind of puts her nose in the wrong spot and kind of starts to pay for it, and Daredevil has to kind of bail her out. That's kind of where we're at. So those are the differences between 616 and 159999. That's probably too many. It's fine. There's a lot of nines. Four nines. So with that, there we are. Discovering Daredevil. So, in the 616 canon, there's actually two different proposed ways that it was, that she figures out that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. There's a situation where, things get really tense and Daredevil tells her. And there's another one where, so another big thing about Daredevil, if you're aware of him, Daredevil and Spider-Man work together a lot, but they're also at odds because Daredevil essentially, if you ever played the PlayStation, for my old people, it's fine, we're old. For my old people that played the Spider-Man game on PlayStation 1, and you would go out of the boundaries towards Hell's Kitchen, and then Daredevil would come in and be like, get out of here, dude. Daredevil essentially has a fence around Hell's Kitchen, and he's like, get out of here, Spider-Man. So with that, yes. So, with that, they're at odds, and Spider-Man's like, I'm gonna figure out who Daredevil is, and then he has an idea that it's Matt Murdock, and he writes it in a letter. He's like, hey, I know who you are, you're Daredevil, I bet you I'm right, puts it in a letter, sends it, and Karen's like, I'm nosy, I put my nose where I don't belong because I'm Karen Page, I'm gonna read this freaking letter. So she reads it, and that's how she discovers Daredevil. Both things happen. There's always, especially with these characters all the way back from the 60s, there's a lot of little discrepancies that pop up like that, and I think both of those are kind of interesting. I really like the Spider-Man version, probably because I'm partial to Spider-Man. But also Daredevil. This is a Daredevil. Now that I'm looking at it, there's a Daredevil picture right there. Drawn by David Mack. Moving on. Relationship. So we've got Dr. Paxton and Penelope Page, parents. So, Dr. Paxton being a scientist and Penelope Page being her, I actually don't know what Penelope Page does for a job. Lack of brain. Okay. Anyway, Kevin Page is her brother, only in, Marvel 15999999. He is not present in the 616 that I'm aware of. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that. Foggy Nelson is a friend / co-worker. Yes. Well, co-worker kind of works for him, sort of, because he's one of the lawyers. And Matt Murdock, ex-lover / co-worker, both in the MCU and in the comics. There is a long-time relationship between Karen Page and Matthew Murdock. So, that sort of persists for quite a while in both instances. So now, notable events. So we're gonna talk very specifically about the comics. So Karen Page is a supporting character in pretty much every situation she's in. So we're going to talk about two very closely related comic arcs because they are the comic book arcs, in my opinion, that Karen Page is most featured in, besides the one she dies in. I thought about covering all three, but I'm never able to get through 3 of these. So, what we're going to talk about is Daredevil Born Again. Also, the upcoming Daredevil show, as of the recording date, of course, upcoming, is something similar to Daredevil Born Again. I don't think it has anything to do with it, but I do feel like these two storylines relate to Oath a little bit, and they're going to be heavy on the Daredevil because, once again, Karen Page is a supporting character, but her influence is seen heavily in these story arcs. Born Again actually being a story arc, we'll talk about it. Let's do this. Daredevil Born Again. So, like I said, Matt, Karen, they start to like each other. When two adults like each other, they get together and they like each other even more, right? So they start dating and they get to a point where they're like, yo, let's get married. I'm gonna stop being Daredevil. And Karen's like, sweet. If you stop being Daredevil, I don't have to worry about you and I can just have a cool husband. I'm down with that. And then, Matt is working with, this is very short-lived, as Matt starts working with Foggy again, and there's an organized crime situation that they start to lawyer against, and Matt gets all, you know what, I could probably do with this a lot better if I was Daredevil. And so he starts being Daredevil, and Karen is like, you know what, I'm out of here. So, she's like, I don't need to be a secretary, and I don't need to be around my ex-boyfriend, so I'm gonna go to Hollywood. I'm gonna make it big, and it's gonna be amazing. So she goes to Hollywood because she wants to be an actress, and when she gets there, she actually has a little bit more success than most people that go to Hollywood, and she is featured in 2 episodes of a show called Strange Tales, and then she has a full feature-length movie called The Tender Touch, I believe is what it's called. A Tender Affair. See, that's why I got the notes. So, with the Tender Affair, what happens? So people come out and see it. Ultimately, a big thing with Karen Page is she always gets kidnapped. She's one of those, she is a love interest in 1960s Marvel comics. That means she gets kidnapped all the time. She's doing okay in Hollywood. She gets kidnapped. This is about to get dark, by the way. She gets kidnapped in a kind of a roundabout way. So, Tender Affair happens. Things are going okay. She is trying to expand her fan base. She's trying to expand her connections within her field. And she goes to a bar that is called Ghost of a Chance, right? Which is not a good name for a bar that sounds like you're going to do well in. But while she's in this bar, Kingpin, New York, Los Angeles, Kingpin, there is an ex-informant for Kingpin that is in this bar, and the assassin that was paid to kill him kills him in front of everybody in the bar. So everybody in the bar gets, everybody that's a witness, including Karen Page, gets kidnapped, tortured, and drugged for an extended period of time to be persuaded to forget the situation, right? So in being tortured and drugged, Karen gets a bit of a hankering for heroin. So with this new addiction, this new struggle, this new trauma, she starts to have a much harder time finding roles, and she ends up going into pornography. And she ends up getting very desperate. Pornography's not paying the bills all the way, especially with a heroin addiction. So she gets to the point she has nothing. She's starving. She's looking for a hit, etc. And what ends up happening here is somebody comes up to her and is like, "Yo, do you have any information that?" Or, well, no, she becomes a Kingpin informant. She says, "Hey, you give me heroin, I'm gonna tell you who Daredevil is." And the Kingpin informant, through the ways is like, "Okay, sure. Here's a hit of heroin. Who is it?" She's like, "It's freaking Matt Murdock." And the guy's like, "All right, I guess I'll tell Kingpin." And Kingpin's like, "Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. But let's test the waters. Is it the blind lawyer? I don't know. Let's see what happens if I start to poke at him." So slowly, Kingpin starts to slowly ruin Matt's life to see if he can out Matt Murdock as a Daredevil. So what he does is, one of the first things he does is, the mortgage on Matt's house defaults, his bank account is frozen, things like this, so his life starts getting worse and worse and worse. And then a new court case comes up that one of Matt's previous witnesses was paid by Matt to perjure himself in court and lie about one of these past things. And Matt's just sitting here like, boy, gee, I'm unlucky. Why is this all happening to me? This isn't working out. And then Kingpin's like, "You know what? Okay, I found him. I'm pretty sure that's him. Let's just bomb him," right? Kingpin typically hires assassins, but he's like, no. Put a bomb in his house. Put a bomb in there. So they bomb Daredevil's house, which doesn't kill him because it's Daredevil. And now all of a sudden we're really pissed off. We're really, really paranoid. And he, without any evidence, he decides it's Kingpin, which he's right, of course, and it is Daredevil, so like eventually we're gonna get there. But ultimately, the trauma and turmoil that Daredevil goes through sends him down a crazy spiral. So he's like, "I'm gonna go kick the crap out of Kingpin. Let's take the subway." He gets on the subway and he sees these three dudes that are trying to rob this lady, and he kicks the crap out of these three dudes, but they didn't actually rob anybody. So this police officer is like, "Yo, you can't kick the crap out of those three dudes, Daredevil. They didn't do anything." And Daredevil's like, "Get out of my way, pig!" And he beats the living crap out of this police officer and takes his nightclub. If anyone's familiar with Chekhov's gun, this is gonna come up later. So anyway, he gets to the end of his situation, and he's a little weakened after bomb, and three guys on the train, and a police officer. So he's not doing super hot. So he legitimately just walks up to Kingpin's fortress and essentially it's like, I'm here to see the Kingpin, and then Kingpin buzzes down and he's like, LOL, let him in. So he pretty much just walks straight up to Kingpin's office, and Kingpin's like, welcome in, buddy. You just outed yourself. I'm gonna beat the living crap out of you. And he proceeds to do so. So he beats Daredevil, once again, crazy, weakened, etc. He beats Daredevil to a pulp, like within an inch of his life. So he's like, you know what? I'm gonna kill you in a good way that also will make Matt Murdock's entire character be thrown out of the window. You're no longer the honest, lovable lawyer from Hell's Kitchen. You are going to be the worst of the worst. So he puts the unconscious Matt Murdock in a taxi cab. He covers him in whiskey so he reeks of it. He has somebody beat a guy to death, a taxi driver, beat him to death with that cop's nightstick. So Chekhov's gun means if you see an item like a gun, if it's pointed out in some form or fashion, it's going to be used, right? So Daredevil takes this nightclub, and now it is used to beat this taxi driver to death, and then it is left with him in the back of the taxi cab, and then they push the taxi cab off of a pier into the East River, assuming that the unconscious Daredevil will. He's all strapped into safety. They push him in the East River, and they're like, yeah, he's gonna die because Daredevil can't swim. So anyway, sinking, and Daredevil, a lot of people seem to think that Daredevil doesn't have powers. He is super strong. Like he is superhuman in every sense of the word. Maybe not to the point of the Hulk, but he is much stronger than a regular human being. So he's strapped into this taxi cab, becoming conscious, realizing that he is underwater, he is able to punch and burst out of bust the back window of the taxi cab. He takes one of the shards of glass, cuts himself free, and he swims away. He was already battered and beaten, much worse, swimming, etc., unconscious, washing away, and he is found by his old mentor Stick, who ends up taking Daredevil to a hospital. And from there, we find that Karen Page has arrived back in New York with her drug dealer because she is looking for Matt Murdock, because ultimately she wants to kind of get back with him, what have you. So back to Karen Page, by the way. So she can't find Matt. Nobody can find Matt at first because Stick has him for a while. So in looking for Matt, she comes upon Foggy. Foggy's like, hey, I don't like that drug dealer guy you're with. How about you come with me? So Foggy kind of takes her in for a while, and eventually she finds Matt at this hospital. Great. So eventually, everybody finds out that Matt is in this hospital, and he recovers and he reconciles with Karen, and they're like, all right, this is gonna work out. And at the same time, Kingpin's like, oh man, this Karen person's back, things are getting kind of crazy. What we need to do is every single person that knows anything about Matt Murdock being Daredevil needs to be dead. So he puts out a hit on Karen Page, he puts a hit out on Foggy Nelson, and but Matt, with the extreme abilities of being healed at a hospital and being superhuman, having reconciled because he was under the impression all his friends had left him because Ben Urich was also Ben Urich being the informant that deals with Daredevil quite a bit, had his hands broken to make sure that things about Daredevil didn't get out. It's a whole thing, but ultimately Ben Urich left him, Foggy left him, and Karen went across the United States. Matt Murdock thought he was alone, which is part of the reason why he became crazy. Having reconciled with everyone, we get superhero strong again, and he rises up to the occasion, and he's able to thwart, overthrow, and expose. This is where we first see, to my knowledge, the first time we see that Kingpin's shadow dealings are laid out to the public, and he is destroyed as a public figure. It's a very, very big deal. So he's able to do this with the power of friendship, right? So that's more or less the majority of Born Again. There's a bit after where he fights Nuke, who's another character that is featured in the Defenders series. So I highly recommend checking that out. And the results of that are actually going to tie directly into this next part. Okay, so relationship with Typhoid Mary. So after Born Again, there is a long stint of comics where Daredevil teams up with Black Widow, and what they're doing is they're searching for, and we've talked about this a bunch in Frosty Features, but this is the first time it's actually in the comic book arc. Daredevil, and because of Nuke is a botched super soldier serum Captain America clone situation, right? So Daredevil and Black Widow are hunting these kinds of people down to make sure that, you know, everything's fine. They're essentially doing this for S.H.I.E.L.D. And this relationship, it's a work relationship between Black Widow and Matt Murdock at this point. And Karen Page is highly suspicious of Matt Murdock. And what ends up happening is Kingpin finds a way, because it's Kingpin, he finds a way to get back to his, he finds a way to get back to a, you know, similar level to he was before, falling apart, whatever, and he hires this new girl in town that is known as Typhoid Mary, and he hires her, and he's like, yo, I need you to seduce, she essentially shows up in New York, she's like, I'm gonna rob this really rich guy who's Kingpin. And he catches her and he's like, I want you to seduce Daredevil, make him fall in love with you, and then betray him and break his world, right? And she's like, and he's like, I'll give you $1 million. And she's like, $1 million, that's pretty good. Let's do it. And so she turns into Mary. So this Typhoid Mary works like this. She has essentially dual personalities. Typhoid being this, she has light mental powers, kind of seducing thing, but she essentially is a hit person. Very much a type of strongman that Kingpin uses quite often after this point. And then she has a second personality that is just Mary and is just like kind of like a regular girl. So Mary goes to Matt Murdock and they start a kind of behind Karen Page's. Karen Page at this point, also for full reference, they're not actually in a relationship. They reconciled, but they weren't together. And Foggy had been chasing Karen for a long time, but he kind of, you know, went his own way and started dating a girl. And Karen's feeling kind of lonely, whatever, but Matt's sort of rejecting her advances. So, Matt meets Mary, and without saying anything to Karen, even though there's something there, but there's not officially anything there, he starts seeing Mary essentially behind Karen's back. And so as this is kind of blooming, what ends up happening is Typhoid Mary is, trying to destroy New York, more or less. Just rob a bunch of people. So during the day, Matt Murdock is dating Mary, and at night he is fighting Typhoid, and he doesn't realize that they're two different people. And eventually, Mary actually, she's supposed to fall in love with Kingpin. That's the plan, right? But she actually factually falls in love with Matt Murdock, and this really pisses Kingpin off. So Kingpin goes to Typhoid and is like, yo, instead of just ruining his life, how about I give you a bunch of money, you hire a bunch of people, and you kill that dude? And Typhoid is like, yes, let's do that. So, she hires a whole rogues gallery. They calm down on Daredevil all at the same time and beat the living snot out of him. And as he's just about to get away from them and actually pull it off, Typhoid Mary shows up and seals the deal. And she picks Daredevil up and throws him off of a bridge. And once again, he goes floating away and he is found and taken to a hospital because it's Daredevil. This time he is found by a nun who ends up being his mother. Which we haven't done a Frosty Features Daredevil, but that would come up in the event that we did it. But ultimately, his mother's very absent from his life and ended up becoming a nun, and she nurses him back to health, and he ends up in a hospital, or ends up taking him to the hospital. So he's in a hospital, and lo and behold, we got two females that come to visit him at the same time, Mary and Karen Page. So it is at this time that he finds out. Karen finds out that there is a relationship that has brewed between Mary and Daredevil at the same time, and she takes off and is all freaking out. So, after Daredevil becomes conscious, he feels very guilty about what he's done to Karen, how he's hurt her, and the whole Mary situation. He feels like a fool, so he leaves town. So at this point, we have this long stretch of comics where Daredevil is fighting people like Mephisto. He leaves New York, but he's fighting like Mephisto and Blackheart and all this crazy. Ultron, Doom, like all these characters are way above the city level. He's usually fighting in New York, and that's fine. He also gets a nice little kind of Frosty Austy style facial hair situation going. But for an extended period of time, he's out of town, and he literally goes to hell, right? He's quite out of town for a while, and he ends up, after going through this big, Mephisto shatters him, and he forgets who he is, and he has to remember who he is, and he realizes he loves Karen Page and all this stuff, and by the time he returns to New York, they reconcile once again, and him and Karen kind of start a thing for real this time, and it's a lot more serious. But yes, ultimately, all that stuff, Karen Page, Oath, there it is. In Marvel Strike Force, they don't care about power levels, but here on Frosty Features, we do. Now, the way that this works, if you are a multiversal threat, you can end all of realities as you wish. You can topple the multiverse at a whim. Universal means you can end your universe, maybe then hop on over to another one and end that one. Cosmic means you are a threat on the small end up to a planetary scale, being able to take out something like a celestial body, all the way up to maybe leveling something like a solar system or galaxy. Nuclear means you have power equivalent to that of a nuclear bomb, leveling things like small cities up to a small planetary body. Super Soldier means that you are beyond all capabilities of a regular human being, leveling things like a brick wall or up to a city block. City means that you might be similar to a human being's power level, but trained to the absolute and utter peak of ability. In Marvel, we see a lot of our mercenaries, our ninjas, our CIA agent types here. And then there's Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that spawned by Hela in Marvel Strike Force, and without the Undying team to back him up and left to his own devices, Greg isn't anything to be worrying about at all. So, theoretically, I, as a regular human being, am auditioning for a part in a tender affair, and I'm going for the romantic lead, and up against for the same part is Greg, the undead Asgardian heartthrob. And both of us are going for it, and the director says, all right, breaks the pool cue in half and gives us both a half and says, hey, you two, Frosty and Greg, fight to the death, and whoever wins gets to be in tender affair. I, in this situation, as a regular human being, have the ability to theoretically, could beat Greg. So, in the case of Greg, we are equating his undead Asgardian physiology, and just because I like to make the argument, we are equating him to a regular old human being. So, in the case of Oath, we don't have comic book situations to back her up. All we have in the comic book is her being a regular human being. There is a situation where there is a Daredevil flash, like a vision that she is a possessed demon, but outside of that, she's just a human being, right? So she would be Greg level. But Oath has something else going on. Oath has been turned into a vampire. Here's the thing about Oath, right? Vampires typically exist on the super soldier level. We've got very much street level situations going. With the implications we have from her attacks and moveset in Marvel Strike Force, I feel like the argument that she is stronger than that is there. And that is where we see where she's doing her attack all situation where she's doing her attack all situation where she's essentially draining blood. She sends this darkness tornado at her at people, etc. So my argument here, with only the proof of what her animations look like in game, is that she is at a nuclear level. Due to the fact that she is sending tornadoes by themselves can level small towns, but also she's flying over and hand-sucking blood, essentially, out of people, implies that she is something stronger than a super soldier level, so very, potentially very strong in context of the Marvel Strike Force universe. Also, currently, as of this recording video, she's a pretty solid character as well. So, for Oath, we're going nuclear. For Karen Page, Greg. And that is, the blog posts. This right here, right? This is the perfect example of a blog post. It has and they had to do it, right? It gives enough background for you to have a good idea of who this character is. This is a character that they reworked to work in their own lore, right? This is it. It's not the other ones that everybody likes to be like, oh, it's Marvel Strike Force lore, blah, 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 blah. No, they copy and pasted crappy, poorly written lore. They did a bad summary, then posted it on the blog post and called it lore. This is lore, right? This is Marvel Strike Force lore, right? This is not a Karen page from 616 being borrowed. This is not a Karen page from the Ultimate Universe being borrowed. This is Karen page from the Marvel Strike Force universe. That's what lore is. Awesome. I love this blog post. I wish all of them were as the script. If they were all the MSF lore, they would write it like this. They would do it like this. This is creative. I love the character, and I'm very excited that she is in the game, and I hope that you are too. That is Frosty Features Oath. I hope that you all enjoyed it. Please let me know if I got anything wrong in the comments. I'd love to hear you. Let me know your favorite Karen page, or more than likely Daredevil points in the comments. I would love to hear from you once again. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe this here on to this channel here on YouTube. Doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. As a reminder, I stream at the link above at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time on Twitch, where we do Frosty Features Live. I hope that you all enjoyed this. I hope that you all have a fantastic weekend. Most importantly, stay cool.